Now welcome to the next episode of the follow-up. Now in the follow-up, if you haven't seen episode 1, we analysed a live match situation or even just something from a video. I like to pick out the key points that I think that probably could do with a bit more detail and a bit more of an explanation to hopefully put a few more fish in your net. So for episode 2, we're looking back at my latest match win at Shrewsbury Valley on Willow Lake. Now, I won the match with £177 and it was a mixture of fishing pea-paste, short, paste in the margins and shallow with slop and pellets and even paste at times. Now, it was a great match. I caught loads of fish, really interesting. That lake is just bites galore. You get loads of bites, so whether you fish maggots, casters, meat, pellets, you name it, you get loads of bites. So it's a great lake. And it's one that I've had a lot of success on. In fact, not wishing to sound big-headed, but I've won every match that I fished on that lake. It just suits me down to the ground. It's a bit of a fish race, lots of bites from like smaller F1s, but them F1s are getting bigger now. They sort of average, I think they're a bit over £1 now. They're getting a bit bigger, and that means we can like change our approach a bit. Before it was all about fishing like lassoed pellets, shallow, and just being in and out as fast as you can. Different to that now. There's a lot more carp, and like I say, them F1s are getting bigger all the time. So really interesting how we fish this match. Now, I don't actually take casters on this lake. I prefer to fish slop for my shallow fishing, so we'll get into that straight away. For me, it's just for this size of fish and where you can throw slop in, it's just a great way to fish. All I use is my odds and ends really. Crushed expander is the main part of the slop. But on this session, I literally used 3 different types of ground bait, just put them in a bowl, just half bags and quarter bags that I had, put them in a bowl and away we go. Now I think about 2 kilos is about right for a match. And in the video, I think I mentioned that I actually feed it more aggressively at the start and then sort of rein it in as the match goes on. So that initial hour, I think, an hour and a half, is the most important part. That's when you need to feed most of your bait, get it in the swim, keep throwing it regular, get that slop slapping on the water, because that's what they love. As soon as it hits the water, they're like piranhas on the top. And if you leave it long enough, keep feeding it and leave it long enough, eventually they'll have loads of fish in front of you. And they love casters more probably than slop, but there's just something about that ground bait hitting the water. And if you can be like disciplined enough to not like go on it straight away as soon as you see the first one, you just gather loads of fish. So that's why I like slop, and where it's allowed, and I feel like the fish are of the right stamp, because I think when they get really big, I think you need to fish like casters more or pellets. But when I think they're like them sort of small to medium sized F1s, they love slop. And so that's what I go with. Like I say, just odds and ends, but if you are just looking to use 1 bag of ground bait, just get a bag of like 2 kilo bag of Sonu Super Crush Expander. That'll do you proud. So that's the ground bait out the way. Like I say, feed it at the start, nice and aggressive. And if you've got a venue that's got a lot of F1s in and you can throw slop, give it a try, because it works an absolute treat, especially if you don't want to buy casters, because as we know, casters are in some places over a £5 a pint now, which is a lot of money, isn't it, if you're going to need several pints. So yeah, so slop's a good way to go about things. With that, I did have some 4mm pellets. I mix in an odd one, but I don't put many in. And to be honest, the tub of 4mm pellets, I just had a bag of fishery 4mm. They were for my short and my edge line. So really, all I was feeding was slop on that line. I do like to put an odd pellet in, because sometimes when you're feeding slop, the fish kind of get preoccupied on it and you struggle to get a bite. That's why I started fishing paste shallow. But again, there's some days where they won't accept that neither, and you do need to fish a pellet on the end. And this was one of them days. So you do need some pellets in your mix, otherwise they sort of gill feed and never ever, you just don't get bites on a pellet. It's funny. So you just need to put an odd proper lump in there. So on to the shallow fishing. Interesting really, because all I thought it was going to be all about this style of rig. I thought we'd catch on. I mean, this has got a tiny little float on there, just in case I need to use these rigs at other venues. But at Shrewsbury, you don't actually need a float. But this is just to, you know, if you do, if I could take these rigs anywhere, basically. So it's got a little float on there, but these are basically the self-hooking, no float rigs. I set up several of these, ranging from sort of, I don't know, 8 inches deep up to about 2 foot deep. Very, very simple stuff. A bulk above a 4-inch hook length, pellet, size 16 B911. I thought they were going to be the rigs, but actually on the day, what happened was, in the video you'll notice it was flat calm, like absolutely flat, like a mill pond. Odd bit of ripple. And actually it was quite cold. You'll notice I had my waistcoat on, I had like a long sleeve sort of t-shirt on. It was cold, it felt cold, and the actual night before it was 5 degrees, and I think the fish just weren't as up for it. Like if you were going today and it's so mild today and muggy, you would catch them on that, I'm sure. If you would catch them on that, I'm sure, because the fish wouldn't be as scared of the pole. But on this day, I definitely felt the fish were backing off from the pole. So this is the rig I ended up catching on, and it looks a bit like you think, how do you ever hit a bite? So let me start from the top. Firstly, all my rigs on the day were with F1 short kits, one piece kits. I think for that style of fishing, they're a must, to be honest with you. I had the white zip, which is just 10 to 12. Through this is about right for shallow fishing, I think. I do sometimes use the orange one, but I think that this one is just an absolute, it's just a beautiful smooth elastic. You'll come and they sort of just go out the peg nicely. But it's, you know, a couple of strips and you're back in control at netting. I think that little bead connection rather than a Dacron is really important for shallow fishing personally. I think it's very direct. I think as soon as a fish mouths it, it just minimises any movement, and they often hook themselves against the pole tip. We've spoke about that loads of times, and I just think it's a great way to do it. So that's one of our little zip elastic beads that I use on there, the yellow version, and it works perfectly for the white. So that's a lovely little part of the setup. But what's really interesting is this length of line. Now, as I said, it was flat calm, and I just felt like the fish were not coming under my pole. Like I went out with my pace shallow rigs to start with, caught a fish straight away, but then they just vanished. Or I caught 3, I think, and then they just sort of went down. But then as soon as your pole's not there, you throw a bell of slop in and they're on the top. And when it's like that, and the fish are just on the back foot, I genuinely believe that these sort of longer line, more traditional style rigs are really effective. And maybe now it's getting warm, this will probably get left in the hold all a little bit more. But it's definitely a part of your armoury that you need to have. And let me show you the key to hitting bites with it. So I've got 2 foot of line. This is 018 exact. I like a stiffer line for my main line, just to stop tangles. And then I've got a 4x8 tinks, a tiny little float, perfect for 4mm pellets, casters and maggots. I do think when you're fishing so shallow, I was only fishing 8 inches deep on this day. I think when you're fishing so shallow, you do want a nice light float with hardly any shot down the line. This has just got a couple of number 10s on it. And a 4x8 just sits there lovely. But if you were to use just a 2 foot length of line for F1s, you just miss so many bites. And I'm not saying you don't miss bites with this, but it definitely minimises it. And the key is this little back shot arrangement here. So just above the float, I've got 3 number 8s. Now that, if it was windy or I was really struggling to hit the bites, I wouldn't hesitate to put like 5 number 8s on there, maybe even more. And what we're trying to do is create that short line effect, but with a long line above it. As we know, when you're fishing for F1s, the shorter you can make that line between your float and your pole tip, the more chance they're going to hook themselves. And we're just trying to create a situation, as you can see there, where we've got a tight line between the pole tip and them number 8s, and then just a couple of inches below that is the float. So as soon as they pull on that, it's almost like they're onto a tight line, and it just works an absolute treat. And it is, for me, it's the only way to fish with them long line rigs. You've got to have them back shots on there. So that is just a brilliant addition to your rig. So that was 3 number 8s on the day. This is the exact rig I used. Like I say, it was 8 inches deep. I did go deeper throughout the day. I set a couple of these rigs up. I did go deeper throughout the day and shallower at times, but 8 inches was about the right depth. Like I say, 4x8 tinks float, absolutely beautiful little float. Tiny little bulk there. And then importantly, I have a 3-inch hook length. Now, if I was to go down to 6-inch, I would probably put a 2-inch hook length on. I think the key is having that little bulk of shot below the centre of the rig. I think that's really important. I think it's because we're sort of slapping it in and we're trying to find the exact depth that they're fishing, that they're feeding. I'm not worried about the rig falling, if that makes sense. We want a different rig for that. What I'm trying to do with this is move the float up and down, like in 1 inch or 2-inch increments, to find the exact depth. Because F1s, when they feed, I've seen them, they come up and like dive back down again, and there's always a spot in the water column where they're actually turning over. And that's what you're trying to do with this. You're trying to present it almost straight, and the fish comes up and nails it and goes back down and hooks itself. If I just had too much like faffing going on, I just don't think you don't see the bites, or there's too much slack in the rig by the time they've sucked the pellet in, they've spat it out, your float hasn't even moved. So for this style of rig where you're trying to hit the bites, you need a short hook length in my opinion. So that was a 3-inch, which for 8 inches was about perfect. And that was the shallow rig, and it was just deadly on the day, and way better and way more consistent than like a self-hooking rig. More than one way to skin a cat when you're shallow fishing, always remember that. I did have a few on pace shallow, but it wasn't quite right on the day. The fish weren't happy to come under the pole, so you could go out and get 2 or 3 quick, but for consistency, this was by far the best rig. And yes, you miss a few bites compared to your self-hooking rigs and stuff, but I was definitely getting more bites in the first place, so really important. Kit-wise, like I say, we just used a 16 B911 and 012 as our hook length, that 3-inch hook length. Really good stuff this. It's tough as old boots is exact. And I actually prefer the original B911s to any Teflon hooks. In my experience, these never go blunt, whereas I've tried all sorts of Teflon hooks over the years, or PTFE hooks, and I just find I end up losing, like they lose the points a little bit. They're great hooks, don't get me wrong, but I just, good old tried and tested B911 eyed, works every time. And it's quite a light hook, so it matches up nicely with the bait. And like I say, R18 for the main line, so nice simple stuff. So that's the shallow fishing covered. Like I say, best bait was a 4mm pellet. You'll see it's a red pellet in there. That's just because the fishery pellets are like that orangey reddy hue, and that's just one of the fishery 4mm. The rule at Shearsby is that you've got to use the hard pellet out your feed on the band. You can't have like specials and stuff. I think a few people were having a pint of specials on the side tray and not buying fishery pellets. Naughty boys. And that leads me on to the second part of the fishing, which was the paste shortening the edge. Now, everyone knows I love fishing with paste. It's just, for me, it's just absolutely a brilliant way to fish, and especially now that these fish are getting a little bit bigger, it's brilliant. Now, I fished 2 spots, but kind of like the same, if that makes sense. I found 3 foot on, it was like a top kit, well, it's this rig anyway. It was a short kit. That float's moved up. It was actually down here. It was it was on a 3 foot mark, and it was a top kit and a short number 3. It just put me on a little bit of a flat spot. I think that was really important in that 3 foot of depth. And then I set up pretty much the same rig, only the float's slightly different, but I'll show you that in a minute, in 2 foot. And that was in a lovely little gap in the edge where I could fish the margins later in the day. On this one, all we've got is a 0.3 JC paste. Now, normally when I use this, obviously I'm normally barely have any shot down the line, but because I'm fishing for F1s with a P, I prefer having a bit of shot down. So I've got a bulk of number 9s there, above a 6-inch hook length. Bit different with a P, you're fishing it more like a pellet, so you do need some shot down the line, something to register, because the piece of paste is only small. And then I've just got a 6-inch hook length. That's 0.12.8 again, size 14 B911, just a standard B911 spade. And that was it. I've just got some back shot above it. And then what was really interesting, and you'll see it in the video, it worked ever so well. I used black zip for a short kit. Now, I've never really bothered with like heavier than a white in the short kit, but I felt like when you're fishing short, you've kind of got to get the fish up and boss them a little bit, otherwise they create too much disturbance and end up ruining your swim. So you need a bit of something that gives you a bit of, like, you can lift them a bit, if that makes sense. And this black worked an absolute dream. It was so smooth, never bumped anything. You just hooked them and they just glided out the swim. But I could quickly, just with a pull or 2 pulls, just get them under control and in the net. I just thought that worked really well. And one little tip, if you put like the heavier zips in a short kit, sometimes they feel a bit pokey when you first put them in. Now what I often do, I think it's on this one, I tie a bit of an offcut there, tight to the thing, and I actually pull the length of black zip. This is like, say I elasticate my kits on the Monday when I first put them in and they feel a bit, oh, that's a bit tight. I'll just trap the bead under there, pull the elastic out, trap it under there, and just leave it for a day or so. So the elastic's fully stretched for a day, and it kind of just takes that oomph out of the elastic, if that makes sense. You just get a lovely smooth elastic, and I've done that quite a lot with heavier elastics. I often like the first meter to be quite soft, and I found that little trick helps do that. I'm just getting a bit of a spider on my cap here, so just a little detail there. Yeah, and that was the short pole paste rig, so a 0.3 JC paste, and then in the margins we went for a JC margin, obviously, JC margin paste. Now again, I actually put some shot on this, just a little bulk, 6-inch hook length. My full intention was to fish pea paste down there rather than big paste, because I'm trying to catch F1s and carp. I don't want to discriminate. You know, there's not there is lots of carp in this lake, but they're not the target species. The target species are the F1s. So you've got to favour the F1s, and if carp come along, great. It's kind of that way around, whereas on the other lakes, it's more target the carp, and if the F1s come along, great. So rather than fish it again with no shot down the line, I just had a little bulk, 6-inch hook length again, just a little bulk of number 10s there, 6-inch hook length, relatively long line, so I can just, again I fished it with this kit and a short number 3, and I could just sort of swing it into position. Really simple stuff. Again, just standard my pace fishing really. The one thing I did like is feeding when my rig wasn't in the water, so I was feeding just 4mm fishery pellets on both margins and short, just throwing them in, hook a fish, throw them in, and I found that best. Wasn't being like particularly frugal or anything. Good handful over the spot, like literally strike, and where the little ring is where you've just struck, get an handful of pellets and lob them on there. Just perfect. Keeps them down on the bottom. So there were the rigs, nice and simple stuff. Pretty standard my fishing really. 3-inch hook lengths I think are really important. Now moving on to the paste, pea paste is just brilliant, and to be honest, the more and more paste fishing I'm doing at the minute, the more and more I'm turning to this stuff, the old Miracle paste. Now I've just knocked another batch up because I'm going to be fishing with it this weekend, and I just can't fault it. It's so good. Like obviously I use the Thatchers with wheat gluten added. I've tried it with a few different ground baits and had the same result. Great, it's great, but sometimes it's a bit of a faff, and my life's a bit rushed as it is, so sometimes I just make up this. So what I've started to do actually is store them in these little vacuum tubs. I found they're a good way to keep your paste fresh. Pop it in the fridge and it's great. And incidentally, I don't know what size this one is, but that's a full bag of Miracle paste, that is, and it fits in there lovely. Now for anyone who doesn't know what it is, it's very similar to what I make with my gluten, and it's best to mix this up a couple of days before you're going to use it. Gives the chance for those binders to activate in there, and you get that lovely sort of texture. I think it's really important that it isn't too stringy, and that's one mistake I've seen quite a few people make when they add the wheat gluten to the ground bait. They're adding a bit too much. It's really difficult because that wheat gluten definitely varies in strength. I've had it super strong, some bags, and other times I've had it where I've got to add loads of it. So just bear that in mind. That's why I've never given an exact measurement, because it changes so much, and I'd hate to say, oh, you need 100ml of wheat gluten to 250ml of ground bait, when that's not the case, because your batch might differ to mine. So, but this takes all that guesswork out of it, and what I like to do is have this as like a soft putty. You know, I was even on the short pole and the 3-foot line and 2-foot line, I was just kind of swinging it into position. So I need the paste to stay on. I'm not putting it in or anything like that. And I want to be able to strike through it nice and cleanly, but I still want it firm enough so I can swing it into position. And this sort of soft putty texture is just ideal. It just works. And that, like I say, that Miracle paste, I'm using it more and more at the moment, and I love it. It just takes all the guesswork out of it. It's just brilliant. A little bit on the pricey side, but it's good stuff. So use that with total confidence. And that was it, really. That was it. I caught the bulk of my weight shallow, £100 I'd say shallow, and I probably caught the other £77 on that short pole and in the edge. Now one interesting thing just before we wrap up, I actually feel like on that Willow Lake at the moment, I think if I'd have just carried on short and in the edge, maybe gone again on this side as well, I think I would have caught a similar weight. The fishing was really good on that short line, and I think the more you fish it, the more carp you would have caught. So I don't think it's just an out-and-out shallow lake at the moment, this one. There's definitely loads of fish around your boots, like on the short pole lines, and to be honest, I'm tempted to go back next time and just fish pace short and in the edge. We'll see on that, because I do love my shallow fishing as well, but that's just a point. It's not an out-and-out fish race shallow anymore. There are loads of fish around you, and they're good fish as well. Phil opposite me fished meat short, and he was catching proper fish, like good carp, and he ran out of meat, unfortunately. Otherwise, I think he would have probably pushed me quite close. He was catching just as fast as I was, and then he ran out of meat, swapped to casters, and his peg definitely changed, and he started catching more F1s and stuff. So just bear that in mind. If you are going to Shearsby at the minute on that Willow Lake, you're just as likely to win the match fishing just short than you are out and out shallow. So it opens it up to a lot of anglers who don't like shallow fishing, and it's just a great lake. It's matured into a great lake, that has. Loads of bites, really good fun fishing. Yeah, spot on. It used to be a bit of a nightmare when they were all this big, bit of a nightmare, but now it's a lovely lake, and yeah, can't wait to get back. Probably going to go the week after next and have another go. So yeah, thanks everyone for watching. Sorry it was a bit late. I hoped to do this a few days ago, but as you know, the weather's been a bit rubbish this week and I've not been able to sit in my garden and do the video. But never mind, we've done it. We'll get this edited now and get it out to you, and hopefully you'll enjoyed that. Plenty of detail there for you to sort of think on. And yeah, don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you again on the next video.